Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Software Development Podcast. Our guest today is Ryan Caracciolo, founder of Striventa and Hyperdrive WP, who's going to share with us how smart strategy, speed, and consistency fuel real business growth without all the fluff. Ryan, thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Hey, Krish, thanks for having me. Appreciate being on.
My pleasure. Before we get started with the topic, I'm going to socialize the topic we picked just a minute ago. If you could just give a brief introduction about yourself and your company to our audience, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah, appreciate it. So I started Striventa about 12 years ago, and the goal was, figuring out the sauce between sales and marketing, those intersections for business growth. Before Striventa, I was in sales in the medical industry and was always held responsible to certain KPIs. And then I worked for an agency, and those KPIs weren't, it wasn't that same responsibility. It was a different set of KPIs. And I thought, man, I don't think business owners care if it's sales or marketing. They care about true revenue growth. How do we move that needle forward? And so for me, naturally, with that background in sales and then understanding the marketing field and being in that for a while, it was okay. There's a real intersection here, and understanding true business growth. Now, the online space is just because I am so competitive, and so I got to know that space really quickly early on, ranking, SEO, local SEO, etc. And it's spun up into what we have today, which is the business growth flywheel. And so this is our approach of what it takes to truly not just grow a business. Anybody can grow a business. Maybe not anybody. Business growth is hard. I'm not taking away from that. But scaling a company, that's the hard part, right? Scaling requires content and process. And so for us, the business growth flywheel represents that. It keeps everybody honest to the program. It doesn't mean I need to do it all, but it does mean that the clients we work with have to adhere to making sure that every component is tackled because, we're in this as a partnership and for business growth for the long haul, not just a short little blip here or there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was good. So the topic that we had loosely picked, and we'll see where the conversation takes us, was the one you suggested. The lesser I know about something, the more excited I am. Sales and marketing is like I quickly mentioned to you right before the call. We are a group of engineers running a startup. So there are some things that come naturally to us, and there are things that certainly do not. And we've
Yeah.
tried to find our way into that space. And sales, I appreciate sales a whole lot more than I would have done as a developer. It's when you're a
Yeah.
developer, you feel like, hey, you build a great product. How difficult can it be to sell it? And then when you go start selling it, is then you're like, you know what? Those guys are there for a
Yeah.
purpose, right? And they make a meaningful, guys and girls, right? Make a meaningful and significant difference. So the topic that you had suggested was sales with marketing and not sales versus marketing. What do
Yeah.
you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is a topic that comes up quite a bit in our line of work. Of course, you have two teams, a sales team and a marketing team. And, in the past, it's always been conversations around, oh, well, marketing has to provide better quality leads, right? These leads are terrible. And then the marketing team says, well, you just don't know how to close those leads. And for me, that friction is weird because it never is an either or conversation, right? Especially in today's day and age, people are submitting form fills and chats, calling in, all sorts of methods by way of converting, right? To tell a company, yes, I want to do business with you. And so it's never about is this lead, closed or not, right? Sold or not, but it should be backed up to the conversation of, okay, what does the marketing funnel look like and how is it building trust with that, potential client in the process, potential customer in the process? And then as it kicks over into the sales pipeline, are we really classifying great opportunities versus not so great opportunities and then tracking close rates against that? Right. And so for us, it's always sales with marketing or marketing with sales because they have to work together. If there is any sort of friction between the teams, the overall business growth isn't going to happen. They have to be unified by original source data, which I think you can appreciate with the line of work you're in, right? Tracking exactly where somebody comes from, whether it's organic search, local search, ads, paid ads, social media, organic social, paid social. Like there's 10 to 20 different original sources that we can track. And it's understanding, who are our best customers, where are they hearing about our company from, and are we really serving them throughout that process? The reason why I say that is because everything is building relationship, right? You had mentioned like we build an awesome product, it should be easy to sell because it's a great product, and you're not wrong in that, right? I think great products do sell well on their own, but I think the key the key line kind of throughout that process is, how are you building relationship? Relationship will always be what fuels business and business growth. And so there's that line of building relationships through sales and marketing endeavors. Typically on the marketing end, it's building relationship through trust by the way of content that you create, right? So is it compelling content? Is it answering the questions that the potential customers are really searching for? Or are you just talking about your brand terms just for the sake of it, right? And then on the other end, on the sales end, it's all relationships, of course. As we know, nobody wants to deal with a salesperson that's just pushy and trying to create their own agenda, as opposed to really understanding, is this a qualified customer, and are we here to serve them, right? So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but through it all, kind of that line of, are we building relationships, are we building trust, that applies to both marketing and sales. And so that's the line that connects them, and it should connect them and shouldn't cause any friction between the teams.
I'm going to have a ton of questions for you. The good thing about, hosting a podcast is I just ask questions and it's up to you to try and answer those. It's a bit it's more relaxing in that sense, to some extent at least, right? So here's
Yeah.
what I want to know. Let's step back here. And again, by way of background, I mentioned to you that the audience is also predominantly, at least has been, developers, but we've grown it recently where it's outside the realm of architects and developers. But given that I'm a developer myself, you try to be selfish to your own needs. So I'm going to ask questions from my perspective, but I know a
Yeah.
lot of people, like, in this space of engineering, also have these questions. When they go to start a company, you're like, I know these two things very well, but I don't know the other 98 things at all. When we started the company, Ryan, we did not even know what those 98 other things were. It's the
Yeah.
known. What is it? Someone said that, right? It's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. I'm borrowing it from somebody else who said that, a more famous person. So here are my basic questions, and by me I mean just people I know as well. What are the differences? What is the difference between pre-sales, sales, and marketing? Now, I'll tell you that when I looked this up the first time, you look up the description online and like, yeah, this makes complete sense. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, I'm not so sure anymore. So what is pre-sales, what is sales, and what is marketing, and how are they different from each other?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one where, if we can just kind of take all the marketing and sales jargon and throw it out the window, because a lot of times there is so much of that going on where there's these, is it an MQL or an SQL, right? And these are real people we're talking about, right? And so I think it's easy to want to create systems to make quick identifications. But at the end of the day, the best starting point is to just say, these are real people with real problems that they're trying to solve. And so if we frame it up that way, I would first start with the marketing funnel, meaning a lot of times people say, is it top of funnel or bottom funnel, or is it mid funnel, right? And you can really break it all down. And I'm not suggesting that, that's not a good endeavor, but very simply, top funnel leads coming in are very much like, I'm interested, right? I may want to do business with you. I may want to buy your product, but I'm not quite sure yet. And so then as they work down the funnel, it's because they're going to your different website pages, or maybe they're on nurturing campaigns where emails are going to them and they're clicking on the links, and they have these stages where they're building trust. And then bottom funnel represents the types of leads coming in that are saying, okay, I'm ready to do business, or at least I want to buy your product, or I want to pursue a service, right? That's just on the marketing end. And so a lot of times I think people get a little too granular, and then they miss the mark of, well, the goal of the marketing funnel is to get them into the sales funnel or the sales pipeline, right? And so I think we have to be focused on different KPIs there for good reason, but I think we all need to be focused on, how do we get them from the funnel into the pipeline? And then the pipeline starts. So when you mentioned like pre-sale versus sale, the way I would look at it is just purely, is this an opportunity? That's stage one, right? And what kind of opportunity? Is it a qualified opportunity or is it not? Because if it's not a qualified opportunity, they may have been a qualified lead, but in order to hit a marker on the sales team to say, hey, this, while it's a qualified lead, it may not be the best opportunity or the right opportunity, then we need to kind of go back to drawing board. But then we have to work them down the pipeline, meaning, typically there's different deal stages. So for instance, I'm just going to share an industry that we're in. So we are in the recovery space heavily, meaning the clients that we have to keep beds full, right, of people that are coming and seeking drug and alcohol rehabilitation services. It's highly personal. It's really close to their heart. It's really close to our heart because these aren't just leads. These are people needing help, right? And so I use this example because somebody may need help, right? And they may be local to the center that they want to attend, and they may have the funds, but they may not have the right insurance, right? So that can represent an example of, okay, this person is a lead coming down the marketing funnel and it's a qualified lead. But then as we kind of really peel back the onion and get into the nuts and bolts of their financial means, they may not have the financial means for this facility. Now they still need help. And so that facility is responsible for making sure that they refer them to another facility where they can get the care they need, right? This is healthcare. This isn't somebody we can just throw off to the side, right? We really need to help them. And so that's where that commitment to relationship, as I shared early on, is that thread, right? Because you may have a lead coming in and they may be a qualified lead, but then as they get into that opportunity phase, they may find out, okay, darn, we really want to help them. They really want to come here. We can't because it's not covered under insurance, or maybe they don't have the financial means. But guess what? There is another center that can help them. So it's in my opinion, it's that company's responsibility to continue that relationship building, to take care of them, and to make sure that they are referred to a place where they can seek help. And so that's where you develop the authority as a company, where people trust you because you're always doing the right thing. You're always focused on serving first, and you're not getting caught up in all these fancy KPIs and jargon numbers. You're really just concerned about the person. If that's the lens you have, then yes, no matter if it's in the marketing funnel or the sales pipeline, those are the main stages that you really have to be aware of.
There's a lot to unpack for me there. And if you hear noise with the noise of me typing, my apologies. It's just I'm trying to capture some notes of what you're telling me so I remember and I don't forget. So I don't know how loud that it comes across when I'm
No,
typing
no,
here.
it's fine. I mean, I guess it's a good thing if you're typing, right? If you weren't typing, I'd be like, okay, get this guy off my show. I'm
No,
just
no,
kidding.
no, because I try to remember as people tell me, but sometimes you forget because there's a lot going on and you don't
Yeah.
understand all of it, right? I want
Yeah.
to recap some of what you said. Definitely not going to add more value, but just for my understanding, right? I'm just going to recap what you said there. So you said the three parts of the funnel, which I didn't know. You said top funnel, middle, and then bottom. Top is when the leads come in. The bottom is when they're actually close to signing up and wanting to pay you for that service of the product, right? Those
Yeah.
are the
Or at
three
least go
stages.
into the sales process. Yeah.
So that leads into the sales process. You said the funnel should lead into the sales pipeline. And then you mentioned qualified lead versus opportunity, and I wasn't sure what you meant then, but you clarified. So I think I understand. What you mean is sometimes when you're prospecting, when let's say we prospect on LinkedIn, it seems like, hey, this person or this company could use our product or service. So it seems like, yeah, they're in the sweet spot of being a qualified lead. But then let's say we talk to them or connect with them and they're like, hey, we like what you do, or we probably don't have the funds to invest or actually engage right now. Then that doesn't become a qualified opportunity, right? So what you want is a qualified opportunity, not just qualified leads. But the starting point to arriving at a qualified opportunity, Ryan, is that a qualified lead? I mean, short of that, you couldn't even get to the next step, right?
Correct. Yeah. And then you also have to make sure your salesperson is really good at their job, right? Because if it's a qualified lead, there are going to be the scenarios where I spoke to where there could be some scenarios where it doesn't work out. But typically, if it's a qualified lead that goes into a qualified opportunity in the pipeline area, right? There's going to be some nuances here or there, but it should be at least somebody, worth talking to, worth digging in more, worth warning about, right? So yeah.
Good point. And then the last thing I was going to ask you there was you mentioned identifying the problem and then providing a solution to it and building a long-term relationship. It's not like knocking on
Yeah.
someone's door and say bye, bye, bye. I have a few questions, to understand the process there. But the first question there is, many, many years ago, right? When I was in college, almost feels like in my last birth at this point. But one of the things I read in that marketing book, if I remember the name of the author, I think it was Philip Kotler. I might be forgetting it's from years ago. The book that I read, or it was prescribed to us, it was just the class that I took, the marketing class. One thing that caught my attention was companies that provided solutions not to existing problems. Like they didn't go identify problems and find solutions to them. They actually made people aware of problems that they didn't think they had in the first place. Apple is a company that comes to mind, at least for me, right? It's not like they're trying to identify problems that are there and giving you solutions to them. At least the creative Apple, not the Apple from the last 12 months, the Apple that we all know and have appreciated over the years, right? They try to come up with a product or a solution or a service or whatever it is that we would have been like, hey, I didn't think I ever needed something like this. And then 6 months down the road, you're like, I cannot live without an AirPods or something along those lines. So taking that as an example, how do you separate the two? Like, do we identify existing problems and find solutions to those? Do we try to, I mean, I have a follow up question, but I just want to get your initial thoughts on this. And does it depend on the size of the company? In other words, if you're large enough an organization, then you can be extraordinarily creative and hand something to Ryan, and Ryan may not have expected or wanted such a solution. But if you're a smaller organization, do we then need to actually only solve existing problems and not be too creative about addressing problems that we think exist, but they may or may not acknowledge that they actually do exist?
Yeah, I mean, these are great questions. So what I would first say is in your line of work where you're developing new products and you're innovating, right? That's probably different than maybe the service example that I gave before, like in the healthcare space. So when I speak to addressing problems, I also mean doing the research on the line end to see how people are searching. Right. And so typically when you want to build trust with a consumer on the line, it's through content, right? There's 3 to 5 frequently asked questions on your website page, in addition to 1,000 words of content, in addition to a video, right? Chances are you're going to be able to build trust with that new potential lead that knows nothing about your business pretty quickly, right? So that's what I mean in the context of solving a problem. It's to help build trust and to help show them this is who we are and this is what we offer. Could we be a good fit potentially, right? And also being aware of what you want to rank for, because in our line of work, like, we have to rank people. Most, if not all, of our clients have full majority of their business coming from organic, right, and then ads on top of that. But ranking organically is so important to driving leads. And so your examples have been more around like prospecting, right, which is a sales effort, or this idea of, do we solve a problem that people may or may not know exists, or do we focus on existing problems? Those are more value positions of business, not necessarily how we build a marketing funnel, so to speak. And so I was just speaking to how do we generate an inbound lead, meaning a lead that's calling in or filling out a form or a chat. And so those are really relevant questions, though, because even if you're creating something that's new, I think a lot of times we focus on like inside baseball knowledge as owners of our businesses, like, oh, consumers would never search like that. I'm here to tell you they search for a lot of weird stuff. That's first and foremost. That's been a weird learning curve. But they may not search for a solution the way that you would describe it, but you're solving a problem, whether it exists or whether it's new, and you want to figure out the puzzle of how do we make them aware of it, right? That's what great marketing does. Is you're either taking a brand that's innovating and pioneering and saying, okay, this is something we're going to solve. It's not an existing problem, but we still have to create awareness around it, right? Which I think you alluded to Apple in the earlier days. They did a great job. They punched into the market with very simplistic messages, right? It was simple. It was something you could trust just from looking. It was almost like it wasn't overdone, or they weren't trying to over animate in this world of over animation. And so they're really intentional about that, among other things. But suffice to say, it's looking at that and saying, how do I just build trust? And so whether it's a new problem you're solving or an existing one, you're still going to have to come to that realization of, before we even try to sell them, how do we help get an inbound lead? Because inbound leads are much more trusted than prospecting. There's still a place for prospecting, of course, on the sales role. But even on the prospecting end, now the sales team needs content to send out, right? Which is where you build. So that's where that sales and marketing come together. So whether you're coming at it from a marketing to sales or a sales to marketing, you can kind of start to see where that intersection will always meet, right? Marketing will empower sales. Sales will obviously close the leads. Marketing's delivering, and everybody's happy. So
Makes sense. Let me ask you a couple of things related to what you said there. You mentioned, sure, I took prospecting as an example because when it comes to sales, for us at least, that is at least the time we spend, that's where we spend most of our time. Like, it's predominantly prospecting on LinkedIn or a couple other platforms. I want to ask a couple of questions related to that because it's not just a challenge, a set of challenges that we run into as a company. I know when I talk to other founders, either personally or even on the podcast, I know, even if we are selling different products or different services, the type of problems you tend to have as a software organization, there is a common factor, right? There's some least common denominator, and some of these questions I want to ask you, Ryan, are coming from that least common denominator. So you're prospecting, it takes an effort to find a good lead, right? You're searching, you look up the company, the person, you spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes more, and you're like, you know what, maybe Ryan is somebody who could potentially use the product that you're trying to sell here. And then it takes us a lot of effort to just draft that message. I mean, we don't use automated platforms. We can come to that in a second. So, and we're very hesitant. We're like, hey, I don't know Ryan.
yeah.
I need to send this message, and it is very painful, to be very honest with you. We have brought ourselves to doing it now more so than like a year ago, because we recognize that we got to do it. Because we'll talk about organic and paid as well, but when it comes to being able to reach out to somebody, it takes an effort. So I want to get your thoughts on how do you get, I mean, is it, it's not just a question of personality. There's, I think the world is coming to a point with AI and whatnot where the roles are becoming grayer than before. Ryan's a salesperson, Krish is a developer. Those separations in my mind are going to cease to exist. Ryan's going to be a salesperson and a developer. Krish is going to be a developer and a salesperson. Perhaps how much of what we do might be different in terms of the proportions, but I don't know the way the world is going, at least it's my opinion, that you cannot afford to hire somebody just for a certain role, because with all the help with AI that we're going to have in future, each of us can hopefully do a lot more than we are able to do today. So given that, I strongly feel developers have to get out of their comfort zones, and I'm talking to myself when I say this, where we choose not to be bothered about selling. I think that's a very developer mentality, if you will. At least it's just
Hmm.
how it's my experience. We try to build software and we're like, hey, you know what? Selling is somebody else's problem. I don't care. I'm given a set of requirements. I'll build a solution. Why do I care about selling? And then when I started the company, I recognized that, you know what? You're going to have a little bit of a lot of different skills. You're going to have to be a master of all, jack of all trades, than be a master of one. So I know I said a number of things there, but my whole real question there is, how do we become people who can prospect better? And the second part of the question is, how do we follow up? Because I can never bring myself to sending that second message to Ryan, because hey, I sent Ryan a message. If I didn't hear
Yeah.
back, it should surely mean that he doesn't want the product. But then I've talked to salespeople who've told me, Krish, if you think you're gonna get lucky in your first reach out, it's never gonna happen. You're gonna have to reach out like 7 times, and someone told me like 21 touch points or some bizarre number like that. So I want to get your thoughts on this process, the challenges, and how you would recommend that people approach this.
Yeah, and people specifically to developers, as you mentioned, or just in general?
As a selfish person, if you could answer it to developers or engineers who are not good at sales, but if you could also answer that generically, that would be great as well.
Cool. Well, I think to developers, I think there's a really, kind of core principle here, and it's you're giving your life to building a product right now that you believe in. And if you believe in that product so much that you're working endless hours, and you're not like most developers that I've met aren't afraid to work long days, especially when they're in the thick of it, coding, excited, right? Understanding if I can get this last line of code done, right? And you're giving your whole life to this. So you're so passionate about something that you don't want to share with anybody. That's how you get over it, right?
Right.
It's like when you start to really reflect on that and you say, man, this product is incredible, but I don't want anybody to know anything about it, right? Flip it around. I'm giving endless hours, 10, 12, 14-hour days, 18-hour days. I'm working all night because I believe in this product so much that I do want to share about it. And sharing about it means sales. And so I think sales has a really bad connotation. I think, people that think they have to jump into sales are like, I got to keep pitching somebody and I have to have slick greased back hair. And I mean, I don't have any hair, so I do all right on sales. So, I think it's just more about the person and understanding them. Yes, you're going to interrupt their day, but if you truly believe in what you're doing and you truly believe that your solution is the best out there, you're not going to mind talking to them a few times. Like, here's a great example. You and I can meet inside of a coffee house. We can shake hands and we can start to get to know each other, right? And you can look at me and go, okay, this guy Ryan, like, okay, he's not crazy. Well, maybe a little bit. I don't know yet. I'm still getting to know him, but at least he dresses presentable. In this meeting, he's professional. Like, there's a level of comfort being built. And in the online world, you don't have that, right? You don't have that ability to interface and to shake hands and to see the person. And we're very relational beings. And so you have to do that through the content you send out. And so there's easy systems that you can put in place. Like, let's say you have 5 different sales messages, so you don't want to do number 2 as a follow-up, but you can program it right into a workflow. There's tons of CRMs that do this, right? HubSpot, for instance, does a great job of workflows where you can text and you can email and you can create a workflow that's a 12-step process, and it's great. And so, but I think to your point, what you're getting at is I've already interrupted somebody's day and I don't want to interrupt their day again. and again and again. And unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that if you're in sales, like, you're going to have to do that. There's no sugarcoating about it. Now, I will say one of the best kind of campaigns that we've ever run, and we continue to do if and when we can with clients, is text, email, call, text, email, call, text, email, call. Right? That 9-step process. Because by the time they hear a phone call from you and that prospect, even if you're prospecting, chances are they've seen the text or they've seen the email before you call them, right? So you can warm them up a little bit, right? And so what we've seen is that whole 9-step cadence. It's simple, but it works, and you can make that last step humorous, right? You have to impart humor. People don't remember the normal, right? They remember the different. They remember things that either made them laugh or made them emotional, a high or a low of a feeling, but they're never going to remember the normal. So if your messages are normal and boring, then chances are you're going to jump on a phone call and it's going to be normal and boring. But if you're able to kind of tease out a value point of the product you have as a developer, and you're able to associate that into an application of how this could really help them beyond the product, but into their life, into their professional life, and really kind of tease that out, chances are you'll have a much better conversation with them.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Number of things you said there that make they're very important. So I'm just going to repeat some of them and correct me if I'm where I go wrong there, right? One is you said there's no sugar coating. You're going to have to sort of get out of the comfort zones, right? It's never easy for anybody to want to interrupt someone else at any part of their day because you don't know what they're trying to achieve and you feel like you're an intrusion. But if by way of that intrusion, you truly believe that you can better their lives as personally or professionally, then maybe you're all right in wanting to cause that interruption. But that there's no easy answer there from what you're telling me. We're going to have to get out of our comfort zones, much like, to be honest, that we've done as a company. Like a year ago, if you told me to send an message on LinkedIn to somebody, have these paid plans on LinkedIn where they give you so many emails. I
Yeah.
promise you, we've not come anywhere close to exhausting any of those numbers because we think 10 times before we send that message. And if anybody we send to responds at some point saying, hey, I wasn't interested, we tend to take that very personally. And we go back to the drawing board every single time. And I've had very good salespeople tell me, Krish, no, it's not that you guys may have done something wrong. It's because they were busy. Maybe they had a bad
Yeah.
day. Maybe there are other
Yeah, they're
distractions
people.
happening, right? We're all humans. So you're going to have to recognize that and not be offended. That's easier said than done, but based on something you're telling me there, Ryan, I'm just going to tell people who are watching or listening as well that there is no easy way out because all of us look for that easy way out in all facets of life, not just in sales. And then after trying and failing, you recognize that, you know what? Unfortunately, you're going to have to do what everybody's done over the years. They got to do it. The second thing you mentioned there is text, email, call. You said 3 times. What do you mean by that? And then the second part of the question is calling. We are in 2025. We're talking AI. We're talking robots doing a number of things. We're talking FSDs and autonomous driving and whatnot. Is there a place for calling even today?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you can use whatever system you want to call out, but yes, calling is something that I do believe in, even to this day. Now, you have people that want to outsource that to other companies, other call centers to actually make that call. That's fine. But my purpose in sharing that was that you can text somebody, you can email them, and you can call them. And in that cadence, we have seen success. Now, again, inbound leads are different than outbound, right? And so you have to take that into account in terms of your conversion rates. But the goal is how do I start building that relationship? And then the other goal isn't to sell them on the first time, but the goal is how do I get them to stop calling my competitors? And so if you're overwhelming them with text, email, call, text, email, right? Now you're getting in front of that. And so, yes, even in today's day and age, again, we're relational beings. Now, if you want to transition that into, okay, LinkedIn outreach in mail as part of that process, I think the purpose in communicating it was that I can reach somebody by their phone, through a text, which is typically less invasive. It's still invasive, but it's less invasive than a call, right? And so now we're kind of tearing it up, right? Email is hard nowadays, right? Most people don't check their emails as much as they used to. Texting is definitely a preferred way that I recommend communicating, especially for sales. But email still has a place because people still get around to it. And email's a chance where you can, again, reaffirm your brand to them, reaffirm the value propositions. And so when they're cleaning up their inbox, even at the very least, they'll see it. Again, it doesn't take much to break through to somebody. And so when you can, be repetitive in that fashion and never break that and be consistent day in and day out, not get caught up in the highs and the lows. Like I think you brought up something that was really insightful. You said if somebody doesn't want my product, like as a developer, it makes me like rethink my product. And I would say, no, that's not at all how I would look at it. I mean, the beauty about developers reaching out and being sales people is incredible because you have the knowledge base of the product in your head. Like, do you know how hard it is for a salesperson that's not a developer to understand the product and then have to synthesize that to 3 to 5 talking points that I think is going to break through? And so I think as a developer, you have a natural leg up in this already because you know exactly what the project is, you know exactly what problems are being solved. So I think the challenge is how do I relate that to somebody and relate that as an application to somebody to better their lives versus reverse engineering it the other way, which is I'm a salesperson, I know how to relate to people, but I don't know all the points about this product. And so whether you come at it from one way or the other, you're still having to learn, right? And you're still having to suck it up and to do it. And yeah, there's no easy way around it. But I think to answer your question more pointedly, in today's day and age, even with all the automation, even with all the different advertisements everywhere, 21, plus times that they need to see you, there will always be a place for relationship. And I think a fun example to point out is I don't know the exact year timelines, but when online chats first started getting implemented on websites, everybody was infatuated with like, how do I build a chatbot? And how do I build automated steps in a chatbot? And it became this incredible tool that I have this chatbot that can answer all these questions. But at the end of the day, people just still wanted their questions answered. And so earlier, like not today's day and age, but like earlier chatbots, they were adopted quickly, but then people swung back to having live agents because they weren't getting the desired results from the initial chatbots because they were still too early, right? It was more cool, but it still wasn't helpful. Now we're in a day and age where these chatbots are unreal. But at the end of the day, depending on the service, depending on the product, right? People still yearn to know, like, at any point in time, I can still talk to somebody, right? Like, this chatbot's cool and it's solving my problems, but to have that realization of like, we all see it where there's like a chatbot, but then there's like 3 other pictures of people there that are like live agent standing by. There's just something in the psyche, I think, as humans to know, like, okay, I can get my questions answered, but just in case. There's still somebody I can talk to, and I don't think that'll ever go away, right? We see trends come and go, and at the end of the day, we're relational beings, and so yes, AI is incredible at the feet that it's growing at right now. But we've seen cool trends before. But the one thing that will always outlast every trend is relationship.
So you mentioned text, email, call. Back to a couple of things I want to clarify. There was you said 3 times, Ryan. What does that mean? So you start with a text message. Let's say I'm going to say this as a dumb salesperson. Tell me what this means. If I send a text message to Ryan, do I only follow that up with an email if I've gotten a response back, or is that email and the call mutually exclusive from the text that I sent? So even if I don't hear back from Ryan, do I still send the email and do the phone call?
Yes, 100%. It is not mutually exclusive. Now, there are automations that you can have where on the email, you can have a book a time on your calendar. And so when they take an action for a conversion like that, where they actually book a time on your calendar, then you can remove them from the workflow. But if you don't hear back from them, you keep pushing forward and you don't stop. You got to be tenacious. Yeah.
Tenacious is the word there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, tenacious is the word, and you have to be tenacious, and you have to be consistent. Most people fail not because an idea is terrible, but it's more so because they're not consistent enough or tenacious enough to make it happen. We just assume that when we create something or we start a business, like everybody in the world would love to do business with us, right? Because it's such a great idea. But the reality is no. People have their own patterns and habits, and you have to be consistent and tenacious. And so even in that model, it can be 9 steps, it can be 20 steps, it can be three. Like you have to customize it to the business. But the point is that repetition wins out. And a fun
But
example we
Ryan,
had.
sorry,
Oh
sorry
yeah,
to interrupt,
go
but
ahead.
I want to understand the sequence, right? So you said text, email, and call. Let's say you hear back with one form or the other, or you did not. When is the second sequence of text, email, call comes into play? Because you said three
It
times. I'm
keeps
trying to
going.
understand. So,
Yeah, it keeps going until they take an action.
okay, so the 3 times is when they did not take an action to the first set of things. You then try to do the same thing again, and then you decide how much time you give between the two, like it's a week or a few days
Yeah,
or
100%. Yep. Sometimes it depends on the industry, but sometimes it's a couple days, sometimes it's next day, sometimes it's a week. But yeah, the text email call kind of cadence, you can repeat 12, 15, 18 times. Like it can keep going. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish in it, right? And I don't mean to sound so vague in that, but every company's way different,
No, no,
so
I get that. Yeah, because I've
it's just the
created
point
some.
of like trying to really stay in front of them.
And then the reason is those cannot be answered with, it's not like a white or black, black or white type of answer there, because it depends on what you're selling, how you're selling,
Hmm.
and who you're selling to, and when you're selling. That's where the
Exactly.
sales skills come into play, right? If it were to be, despite all the sales automation platforms, Ryan, the one thing I've learned, at least over the last year or so, is I've talked to people who are incredibly good at sales, and I know that these tools can help me as a developer get a little bit better at sales than I might be. But when I look at or talk to a really good salesperson, I know that they bring a certain value to the table, the company or the person individually, right? That the tool may or may not. So I want to just call out for that, right? My respect for salespeople has just grown exponentially over the last year or two, whatnot. Because, like I mentioned to you at the top of the call, where as a developer, we tend to sometimes believe like we've built these phenomenal products that nobody needs to sell. That means that Apple did not have to sell, right? I mean, they do. I mean, there's many differences. Even Coca-Cola has ads, right? You have ads for Coke all the time. I mean, in different forms and shapes. So that becomes an incredibly important part. You also mentioned inbound versus outbound leads, right? I want to understand that inbound leads is somebody finds you either
Hmm.
through search or your content that you publish or videos out there, and they come to you to want to do business with you. And is outbound lead more sales, like where you're
Yeah.
prospecting, or is that something else?
100%. It's prospecting. So whether you're sending out email batches or you're sending, calling all day, that's prospecting. That's outbound. Inbound is purely form fills, chats, calls coming into you because they found you organically on social, on ads, etc.
And then when
Usually
it comes
inbound leads are more qualified too, which is the beauty about them is if you can take the time to build a strong organic presence, a strong social presence, all those things, those leads that come are usually more qualified than just prospect. Now prospecting has a place, of course, but two different types of leads.
leads. And then when it comes to inbound, what are some ways that you've seen that things work? Like for a product company or a service company that's building software, what are some good ways to facilitate the inbound leads, and what are some not so good ways? In other words, where you've seen people do that and you're like, you know what, that's not a great idea. Like if you can just educate
Yeah.
us with the differences between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. So the companies that do it well and the companies that do it great and quite frankly the way that we believe it's all on the blocking and tackling, meaning the game is won in the trenches, not just taking shots down the field so to speak with a Hail Mary pass, right? So what I mean by that is taking the time to build the right website that has a solid foundation, not just a website that communicates your message, but one that you can actually rank over time. So organic search continues, at least in our line of work, continues to be the number one source of hot qualified inbound leads. People are searching and they're searching to solve a problem that they have. And so I don't like guesswork. I don't like pitching viral ideas like, hey, Krish, if you do this awesome video with Snow Pal where you and this animal are frolicking through the fields, it's going to be so funny and people are going to buy it. No, I first want to start with the foundation, which is how are you ranking and what are people actually searching for? So I like to start there. And that's how you build a strong inbound foundation first. And then you can bolt onto it ads on top of that, right? That contribute to the inbound process. Social media, don't put a toe in the water and just post on every source for the sake of it. You'll drive yourself crazy. Like really focus on one source, become a master of it, and then move on to the next source. So figure out where ideal customers are first on the social landscape. Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Facebook? Are they on, are they subscribing to YouTube videos? Or I mean, heck, there are so many social media sources out there nowadays. Like, there's always going to be the big ones, right? Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, YouTube. And I'm lumping YouTube in there because that video work is everywhere now. And so, what you're getting to is a point where it's not just search engine optimization now, but it's search everywhere optimization. And that's where you have to be a master there if you want to win the inbound game. And so, taking the time, I mean, it takes a while. Like, it can take 6 to 12 months to build a solid foundation, but then you start ranking well. It doesn't mean you can't rank before then, but I just mean like one that's actually going to scale with you, not just have like a quick growth on the radar, and that's a lot of time and investment, right? So that's the inbound side of how to do it properly there. It all comes back to the content. It all comes back to how are you telling compelling content and how are you pairing that up with what people are actually searching for.
Great points there. You talked about compelling content. Let's talk about that for a minute or two. So I give you a background to our podcast, for instance, right? So we started socializing the work we did from an engineering standpoint. Hey, here's what we did, how we built our feature on the mobile app. here's how we implemented this API in Golang or something along those lines. And here are some issues we ran into, and we provide these solutions. That's how we started our podcasting. And then we grew that into talking to people, experts such as yourself. So we learn about other things. But I give that as a quick background because we did not start the podcast thinking that we wanted something out of it, to be honest with you. It's just that, hey, we want a way to socialize what we did. And we were like, you know what? It seems like something that we enjoy doing and feels like this is one way we can give back to the community in some small way, form, or shape. That being said, now let's say we're having this conversation about sales. We as a company are not a sales company, right? We have nothing to sell in terms of, we don't provide sales services, but we try to have conversations that's outside our space in the hope that it adds value to
Mhm.
people doing something of this nature. And by them stumbling into the podcast, the conversation, the article, the message that we post, and yada, 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 they find out a bit more about our company. And maybe they have a need that we are able to help them out with, right? We have products or services that we can help out. First question is, does this make sense? And does this even make sense? And two, it seems long-winded, right? The inbound seems very long-winded. Oh my God, rather than me look for Ryan on LinkedIn and tell Ryan what exactly we do and ask Ryan if that is something that he could possibly benefit from.
Mhm.
Inbound is like, it's like a lot of work, and there's surely no guarantees of life in any scenario, but let alone in this. But what I'm trying to ask there is, how do we is it worthwhile doing it, and why should we do it? In other words, if someone said, Ryan, I only want to do like prospecting or sales or outbound because inbound is very expensive, I'm not sure
Mhm.
how to do it, what would they be losing out by not doing inbound market?
Scalable growth. Full stop. I think it's easy to get caught up in the I'm making calls, I feel good about the traction I'm making, but at the end of the day, if you don't make any sales from it, now you're out the phone calls and you don't have a foundation that has grown behind the scenes so you can scale. Right. So I think it's a both and conversation. That's where we had the conversation around sales and marketing, not sales versus marketing. Is even in those prospecting messages, you're going to have to send them some sort of content or some sort of link or quiz or on demand something. Right. And so at the end of the day, like you will always be coming back to that natural conversation of how is marketing enabling sales to do their job better, right? And then how is sales enabling marketing's job, which is I got to close the deals coming in. And so inbound marketing may seem like a huge lift, but at the end of the day, if you're not building kind of your growth machine behind the scenes, so to speak, you're just going to be making phone calls. And there's nothing wrong with it. I come from a sales background, right? I was the guy driving around to 20 to 30 doctors' offices a day prospecting for referrals, right? So there is value and I see that. But I think to be so single focused on one or the other, you're limiting your business growth. You're limiting the way that your company can and should grow and scale over time. And so I think it's a both and conversation. It's not an either or.
Makes sense. And what should the type of content be? This is something we sometimes, not sometimes, all the time we struggle to find out. Hey, you know what? Our natural inclination is to create engineering content because that's what we do for a
Yeah.
living and that's what we enjoy
Yep.
doing. We then realize, when people are going to YouTube, we ask people, we do a quick short survey and whatnot. Even, even as a developer myself who's running a company now, when I wind my day and I want to go to YouTube to have a break from the routine, I'm hardly ever looking for more engineering content. I'm looking for something that relaxes me, right? Something that's silly or stupid or funny or whatever it could be. I'm not looking to go sit at the end of a 10-hour day. I'm not trying to go look for a YouTube video that's like, okay, how do I do one more thing? Maybe Amazon Bedrock, for instance. There is a place for that, but perhaps it's not at the end of my day. So then what we decided was we try to create content outside of engineering. Surely it's not our expertise. We were like, you know what, it's still fun to do it, so we still do it. But we're never certain where our focus should actually be. Should it be where we excel, which is in engineering? But
Hmm.
perhaps people are not on YouTube looking for engineering content, not all the time. If you look at the views and videos, somebody who takes a camera and goes to India and who's having food or talks about how they got, I don't know, whatever their experience was, gets like 6 million views. And then here you spend like 6 hours trying to learn something or do something, and then you create a 30-minute video, and there's like 40 people who end up watching it. And then you're like, you know what? Maybe I should just grab a camera and go someplace and have some food and post a video. So I know I'm making it sound perhaps a bit more preposterous than it might actually be, or maybe it is that
No,
preposterous,
you're not
Ryan.
making it sound preposterous at all. No, it's a very
How
real example.
what should the content be, and how do we find the right type of content that we should create?
So I'm going to share with you the number one secret tactic that we use to figuring out compelling content. You ready?
I'm all ears. Go for it.
Interview your existing customers. It's as simple as that. I have worked in many different verticals, many different industries, and I say it kind of in jest, but the reality is your best content curation is right there at your fingertips. Meaning, I have asked people before, can you hop on a 30-minute call with me and I'll give you a Starbucks gift card? It's incredible what people will do for a Starbucks gift card. I'll get life stories. It's nuts. But really, if you have a customer base, right? I know sometimes startups, struggle to have a customer base, but at the end of the day, you'll still have 5 to 10 people that you can call up, you can interview them. Where do you get your information from? One of the coolest examples we ever heard was we were working with a company that does the fire inspection stuff, right? So they go through and they make sure all the buildings are up to code, and they make sure that buildings are safe, secure, and then if they're not, they go in and address the issues, right? And so where are you going to find engineers that, like that was their target audience, was like a engineer that runs a few of these buildings or has designed them, or maybe a maintenance director. And like, do you think they're camped out on Facebook or YouTube? Like, no, like probably not. But I called them and I just said, hey, can I call some of your existing customers that love you? And one of the engineers, he was like, yeah, we get together once a month and we all meet. I was like, hold on. You all meet for what? He said, well, for lunch. And then we talk about the latest things that are happening in the building world. And I was like, and you do this each month? He's like, yeah. I was like, how many people attend? He's like, I don't know, 40 or 50 a month. It's like, okay, can my client bring in lunch to those meetings? And he was like, that would be awesome. We would love to have lunch. And it's just such a beautiful example of let's not overthink it here. Let's go to our existing customers. Let's interview them. Let's figure out where are they getting their information from, why they came to you in the first place, what problems they were solving, and then let's compare that to online searches, right? So that example was fun because for a lunch once a month, now I have a client that can go talk to 40 to 50 engineers, and they told me, man, if we worked with 5 more engineers a month, we would be totally happy, right? Because they were big contracts. So I'm looking at this going like, we don't even need online at this point. Like your website's great. It's beautiful. It has the content on there that we all need. But like, instead of investing in Facebook ads or Instagram ads to target engineers, let's just go meet with them once a month. So that's a hyper local example, but I think it's one that is built on interviewing, figuring out what these little nuggets are, and then going from there, right? And you can do that with any company. And so really it's not this like viral idea that we have to come up with. It's a matter of saying, let's go talk to our existing customers. Let's thank them for their time. Let's serve first. Let's give them a gift card for 30 minutes to Starbucks. Let's make that investment. I know some people don't want to do it, but it's like for 20, 25, 30 bucks, like I can get all this insight and then I can go compare that online. You learn this through, hey, what brands do you shop for? Like, are you into Bass Pro Shop or are you into Apple? Like, there's just such varying degrees that you can learn from people. And so you have to be fascinated with people first. You have to understand that we're solving problems and we're there as a service, as a resource. Even if it's a product, I'm trying to make their life better. And so I need to first understand their life. I need to understand what they go through. And then I can seek to improve upon it. But your existing customers will be your best source of information as to the new ideas. And then using that as a litmus test, comparing it to online search queries, or, if they say they get all their information from LinkedIn, then let's go hard on LinkedIn, right? But let's use that as a source to draw from first.
Amazing points there, right? I'll tell you one thing, right? Based on everything you've said there. One more time, go back a year or two where I was just in the zone of building software, not worried about selling. I've said this to a couple other guests on the podcast where we believed for a long time that, hey, we built something that we're totally proud of and we believe it's adding significant value to whatever it is that people are wanting to use it for. So we didn't have to worry about where we put it. People are naturally going to find it. And then very soon we realized that, because I went to a conference and there was like what is it, like $8 billion company and we do investments and trading all the time as people outside of our core engineering lives. So we tend to believe that we are familiar with most of the companies that are in the business of engineering, right? But this company was an $8 billion company that was doing something that's very close to, like they were building IDEs, like integrated development environments that we could use. And we use a number of them already. But it was not that I didn't know, I had not even heard of the company. And they were an $8 billion company, which meant told
Wow.
me that they're showing up at the AWS summit, they're talking about what they do. And I'm like, okay, there are like six other companies or products that do something very similar, and we actually use one of them. And then they were like, yeah, here's where we differentiate ourselves. And then I had a conversation and I thought to myself, there's two ways to look at this. One is even an $8 billion company, a company that's valued at $8 billion, needs to show up at these places and conferences because otherwise, even
Yes.
people who are building software may not know about them because we didn't know about them. And two, they are doing a few things that are unique, but their entire offering is not 100% unique, meaning a lot of us could use something that their competitors are building and never need what they're doing, which told me that when people ask us, "Hey, can I use your competitor's product or offerings or whatnot?" I think the simple answer could be possibly, but here are the value that the here is our proposition, right? Here is the USP that we bring to the table, because as a developer, I would have thought that we only could sell something if you did something that nobody else ever did. But as it turns out, that's not true. There
That's
is
such
room for a lot of
yeah.
people in this world where you could be doing something that somebody else is doing as well, but you're providing this niche value, or there's some small differences that you bring to the table, and now people have a reason to buy it because I was like, you know what? Why should I be using your IDE versus someone else's? Unfortunately, they were not able to answer that question. And that told me they were probably a developer like myself. They didn't know how to do the
Yeah.
pitch. A better salesperson would have answered that question a whole lot better and perhaps closed that deal right there. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts on being a pioneer versus a follower when it comes to selling products and services?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, one that probably plagues a lot of businesses, paralysis by analysis, right? Are we really doing something that people need as a pioneer? Are we just reinventing the wheel? I think at the end of the day, you see this happen all the time. That's what's great about America and competition, at least from my own experience here. It's, competition will always produce a better product or service, right? There's that iron sharpening iron refinement. So you don't have to be a pioneer to start a business or to build a product. I mean, obviously you can't copy somebody's intellectual property, of course, right? But if you know how to build it better, smarter, etc., I don't think that should determine your value. I think what determines the value is the adoption of the market, because that's the revenue you're generating. At the end of the day, businesses have to generate revenue to provide income for employees and to provide resources, etc. And so I think it's just a matter of saying, am I solving a problem? And if I am I doing it better than my competitors? Because we see this all the time, right? In big scale, small scale, doesn't matter. There's always going to be competition. And the beauty about that is there's a constant refinement and a constant push to be the best, which usually should yield in the best product out there or the best service out there.
I think very well said, because I can just add a couple of more points to it, which is Apple's been lagging behind in this AI space, and there's talk recently that they might acquire a company like Perplexity or Anthropic or one of those companies that have been lock, stock, and barrel in the AI space from
Yeah.
day one. It's hard for me to even believe or recognize that a $3 trillion hardware slash software giant like Apple now has to come to terms with the fact that, we might actually need to bite the bullet and acquire some other company, which is very unlike them if they end up doing it. So they are lagging behind, unquestionably so, at least in my opinion, right? But they can actually come up with one really good feature in the next 6 months or a year that makes Siri better than it has been in the last 15 years, which shouldn't be difficult because it's not been very different in the last 15 years. And then they have 2 billion devices out there. So the moment you have that one or two good features, then the fact that Apple was lagging behind in AI perhaps is something not any consumer is going to care about. You know what? The Siri does a phenomenal job today that it didn't do yesterday or day before. I don't care if Apple's a pioneer or a follower. It solves my problem today, so I could do it. Right? That's one example I can think of. Another one I can think of is Tesla and EVs. I read that there's like 100 some EV companies in China, like literally that many EV companies, some big number. Tesla's got its competition. Not in the US, maybe not as much, but if they have to sell overseas, I mean, they have to, they sometimes might have their back against their wall. So even a company that's the largest EV company is going to have stiff competition, and they're going to have to come up with ways to actually make that push to sell.
Yeah.
And I bring
Yep.
up these big companies, Ryan, only because sort of speaking to myself and other founders of startups and early stage companies, because if Apple and Tesla have to find their way out of situations, who are, I mean, who are we to, think that we are in a safe space or comfort zones, right? There is no such thing and we have to work towards it. So everything you've shared here is incredibly useful, unquestionably so. But it's also challenging to us as developers to accept the reality, because what you said was you've got to be persuasive, right? There's no sugarcoating there. You've got to be honest. You've got to say what your product really does. You've got to also have some humor and be distinct when you do these reach outs so people take an interest in what you're doing. So persuasive, honest, humorous, that's a lot of stuff, Ryan. So there's no easy way out, correct? That's what
Yeah.
it sounds like. There is
Correct.
no easy way out here.
There's no easy way out, but the reward is great.
And can we, one of the last questions before I have give you an option to ask me something is, do we need a sales team, or do we work with companies such as yourself and your company where you're not embedded into our teams, but you're a separate company that helps us? Which way do you recommend that startups in particular, right? Startups, whether they're funded or early stage startups, go about finding help that they need when it comes to sales and market?
Yeah, great question. I think everything's a trade-off, right? So for us, we don't desire to be a vendor, right? So if you're looking for someone to do SEO or local SEO as a kind of sniper tactic, we're not a good fit. And the reason why I bring that up is because if you're truly looking for a business growth partner, the trade-offs will be that you have to invest to get the partner. That's worth it, right? But the trade-off is that you still get to focus on what you're great at, right? And so it's just a matter of time, talent, treasure, right? It's always going to come down to that. So am I willing to invest my time to learn something that isn't in my wheelhouse now, but I want it to be? Okay. Or would I rather pay, the capital to just partner with an agency like ours to where now our uptime is greater in the market, right? So it's a trade-off. I always tell clients, like, if we're working with a client and we see that we have to get 75,000 words of content on their website to be competitive, do you want to do it in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? Right? The run rate's up to you. Do you want to be aggressive or conservative? And so I think that's how we would view this conversation is, are you looking for a partner that can help expedite, your revenue growth? Yes, it will be an investment, so you have to do that, but your uptime will be faster than if you were spending the man hours or the woman hours doing it on your own. And so that's really where we align ourselves really well with our partners is they're experts in their field, we're experts in our field. We come together as a team collaboratively. We both focus on what we're great at, and now we're able to scale up faster than if it took them a year or 2 years on their own just to learn it, right? And so I think that's what companies have to answer. I don't think people naturally build in marketing budgets. Like I don't think that's a top of mind thing to say. But the reality is you should. You should always be reinvesting in marketing, not because that's what I do and I want people to invest in it, but it's part of your business growth. So your sales and marketing budgets, they have to be taken just as seriously as your product development, budgets, right? Your research and development buckets. Like this is what it takes to run a company is having those line items really detailed out and understanding what the trade-offs are if you don't invest that way.
I couldn't agree more with you. What you said there was, when you talk about your budget and where you're spending that money, and I say this because we've done it many different ways, and I genuinely agree with what you said there, which is if you think you need a developer to help you build something, you also need a salesperson. By sales, I mean sales slash
Yeah,
marketing, somebody to
exactly.
help us understand how we are able to take this to market, how we are able to socialize this with the different communities. You mentioned a number of different things, like whether it's organic campaigns or organic growth, or it's paid campaigns on Meta and Google and these other platforms. A lot of what you've shared here, Ryan, is incredibly useful. And I would have been a whole lot more ignorant, or we would have been as a company, if I'd had this conversation like 2 years ago. I'm less ignorant, still ignorant, but less ignorant, because we've run into these challenges, and then we've started
Yeah.
appreciating all of these terminologies, because to everybody who thinks marketing is buzzwords and sales is buzzwords, and It's not something you need. It's a nice to have, not a must have. And it's not budget you need to allocate. I can emphatically say by my our own experience that you couldn't be more wrong. You actually need somebody to help you with sales. Now, whether it's somebody in your company doing that full time, part time, or you engage with an agency such as yourself, Ryan, that's left to clients and companies to decide what works best for them. But I think it should suffice to say that that has to be a piece of the puzzle. It was not for us to begin with, and I wish we hadn't had that phase at all, to be honest with you. As to when you engage with a sales or a marketing partner, that's something for another day, I think, because that's a topic I've had in the past where do
Yeah.
you engage the partners on day one before you have a product? You engage those partners when you actually have a prototype, or you engage
Hmm.
somebody when you have a full blown solution? There are a number of those questions that remain, but everything we've said here, starting with relationship and trust and funnels, and I'm just making quick notes here: qualified leads, opportunities, commitment to relationship, organic, paid, the campaigns, the campaign structure, the platforms that you set up these campaigns on, the text, email, call, repeating it 3 times or n number of times, inbound versus outbound leads, and last but not least, persuasive, honest, humorous, and n number of other things that you have to be to actually make the sale. Anything that I've missed? I have one last thing to ask you, but anything I've missed here, Ryan, that you would like to sort of add as we come to a closure?
No, I appreciate it. I think you covered it really well and just thankful to be on and just to be a resource. Always happy to do a follow up on those other items you touched on, or, if people had any other questions, happy to provide a workup, documentation, etc. Just want to make sure I'm a resource for you also. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And we're going to include the links to your LinkedIn profile and to Striventa, your company page, so folks can, our community is predominantly in the US, but there's a fair percentage of people in Europe, and then a growing group of people in Asia and Africa, but that's kind of how our split is. So hopefully, there are people who need the service, and clearly they can tell that you surely know what you're talking about, and that's something we need. As people trying to build and sell a product, we need help, right? There's no shame in accepting it. If I said that I didn't need it, it means I'm going back 3 years of my life. Now that I've come 3 years forward, I know that we need that help, and very genuinely so, right? I have one non technical question to ask of you. But before I did that, I know it's been 1 hour of me throwing questions at you. Is there something that you want to ask me, Ryan, just with the conversation we had so far?
What was the hardest sales conversation you've had to have?
I'll answer it in two parts. Every sales conversation that we've had has been hard.
Oh,
And I'll pick the
yep.
hardest one. I'll tell you why it's been hard. We've gone into these meetings. So getting a meeting is challenging enough already, right? And then we have to get past our inhibitions with prospecting and follow ups and yada, yada, yada. But let's say we do end up on a call after all of those efforts. We go to those conversations expecting that people have done the due diligence, that they kind of know what we're doing because we've made it. We thought we've had the 300 character message on LinkedIn beautifully done with one small link that tells us exactly who we are, what we
Yeah.
do, what problems we solve. So we're ready to answer further questions and take the conversation forward. But then we get in this call, it starts from ground zero, like they did not even read the message that we sent to them. And the first instinct was, oh my God, Ryan, why are you wasting my time? You should have read what we sent you. We were like, no, we can't do that. We're trying to make a sale here.
Yeah.
But then we're
Yeah.
like,
That's not a good sales strategy.
not at all,
So,
right? But I want to be honest with you
yeah.
because,
Yeah.
we're, as engineers, we disagree about engineering decisions all the time. And we try not to use euphemisms as much. I'm not speaking for the whole community. I'm just speaking from my product experience because I used to work for large product companies and we're like, you know what, Krish, cut to the chase. Forget all the euphemisms because we don't have time for that here, right? We don't we didn't care for niceties. The first challenge was the sales call is very different from an engineering meeting. There's got to be niceties. I mean, there's got to be some small talk of some form or shape, and I can do it better than a lot of the people I know in my team that can do it. We're going to have to ease into the conversation and accept the fact that people come unprepared, so they don't know what we're selling. I mean, I could be selling mangoes here, and they wouldn't be surprised because they've come that unprepared.
Yes.
And then we told ourselves, you know what? We're trying to make the sale here, so they can come unprepared. Let's believe that they are going to come unprepared, and let's try to see how we could educate them. Right? That's the
Yeah.
fundamental
Yep.
difference. The second
Yep.
part of it Even when they do come prepared or not so prepared, we've always prepared. We went to the meeting trying to approach the problem a certain way based on our past experience, right? We forgot that Ryan's a new person, runs a new company, different challenges, different background. So, what Ryan might want to know could be very different from what Peter wanted to know, from what Raj wanted to know from us in the previous calls. So, a lot of this has been learning for us on the go. And then you asked me about the most challenging call. We go, let's say one of the things we do is sell APIs, for instance, right? We can build software really quickly so we can integrate APIs and not have a backend team or have a team, but not as big as you may have had in the past. So you can save time and money and whatnot in building your software, right? That's one of the things that we do, that you can subscribe to our APIs. That's what the call is about, APIs. We have different, on a calendar page, we say, hey, are you calling us for APIs, for mobile app, for project management, whatnot? They had picked an API and we're starting to talk about that. After a 4-minute initial introduction, the question they had asked us had nothing to do with APIs. That's all right. Maybe they looked at something else that we did, then they want to know about that. So we're like, okay, that's okay. It's not APIs. Maybe you like our education platform. That's what we want to talk about. They're like, yeah, no, I don't know about the education platform you guys offer. They're like, okay, maybe you want to know about the project management platform that we offer. They're like, no, it's nothing about that either. The last thing that we do there is managed services where we can help you build software. So it's got to be about that because I've eliminated all the other things that we do. No, it was not about that either. They asked us something that we've never ever done and we're not doing right now. And we never socialized. I mean, we didn't say that we were going to do in future. And we didn't react to it very well because we were young in our sales experience, Ryan.
Yeah.
We were like very blunt. Oh, you know what? We don't do that. Maybe it's not the best way to spend your time or our
Yeah.
time because it's not something that we do. And we respectfully said, you know what? Maybe you should keep looking because unfortunately we don't do that. But thanks for your time. And then we hung up. And I'm like, I don't know if this is the best way to handle this call. This doesn't make sense. So I called somebody who I know is a great salesperson in Boston. He was like, Krish, that's all right. We all make mistakes, we learn. I would not do it this way. So before we
Yeah.
end this, Ryan, can you tell the audience, because if you're thinking, Krish, you're the stupidest person I've seen, that could be true. I don't disagree, but I will promise you that when I socialize this experience to other engineers and architects and developers, they don't find this like as something ridiculously wrong, but I know it was wrong. Uh, and that tells me that it's not just me who's ignorant. There is a whole community of engineers who are ignorant about sales. So how do you think we should handle this? I know I've given you some details about this call, not a whole lot, but how would you address this situation? Is this ridiculous? Is this common? How do we approach this problem?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to educate the entire developer community on this.
Hmm?
I'm just kidding. I don't want them to think that I'm against developers by any means, but the way you've laid it out, I think is really insightful, and it's okay, it's okay to kind of have fun a little bit and to kind of peel back the onion a little bit and to know like that's not a great strategy, right? Like
Terrible
like
strategy.
from
Yeah, you don't have
it's
to
a
use
terrible
euphemism. It's a
strategy.
terrible strategy.
I will agree with you 100%. Now, there's a difference between understanding are we really the right fit or not versus being so rigid and this is what we do and nothing will divert from it. And if you don't like it, you can leave it. That mindset will definitely not grow your business. And so it's a learning opportunity. But no, I think as you've laid it out, certainly the challenge is how do we break out of our comfort zone and realize as much as we think our product or our string of code is the greatest thing in the world, if
Since
people
sliced
don't know
bread, right?
since sliced bread, if people don't know how to apply it, they're not going to see the value in it. Right. And I think that's the companies you've alluded to in the earlier part of our conversation that have been very successful have not just been tech companies, right? But they've been people companies. They have shown people how their tech is making their life better, is making their life more consistent, more convenient. Consistency and convenience will always win out, by the way, in anything. I am a firm believer in that. So, anyway, I think as you've laid it out, right, the developer community has to realize if we're going to spend time building these incredible products and building software that can truly revolutionize spaces, then we also have to make sure that the people we are wanting to sell it to understand how revolutionary it really is. And the best way to do that is to relate it to their lives. And if you can't do that, you won't be in business for too long.
Very well said, Ryan. But just to make your life more difficult here, how would you handle this call that I mentioned? Even at a high level, what are
Yeah.
some changes that we could make to have made this call better than clearly I've explained to you how it was?
Yeah, great question. I would say a further discovery would have been great, right? Understanding, hey, they didn't do their research. Like, I love the example you said where you could have sold them mangoes because they didn't do their research, but very few will, right? People are used to having the information given to them, spoon fed, right? And so you have to understand that it's not anything against you or your company, but these people are busy too, right? They're running companies, they're running teams. And so if you're going to interrupt their time and their day, like you need to make sure you are service above self. You are serving first and you are relentless about that. And so I would reframe this call to maybe take a step back and say, hey, originally we had approached you about this. It sounds like those expectations could have changed, or maybe what you're searching for now, a solution, might have changed a little bit. Can you walk me through what it is you guys need? And when you ask open ended questions like that and you allow them to talk, you allow them to explain, you allow them to kind of share with you what they're going through, what you're doing actually is you're building trust and you're bringing them to the table. There's a difference between bringing somebody to the table and then forcing them to sit at the table. There's a big difference in that. And so, always asking a further discovery around that and resetting expectations is what I would have done in your example. And then, if you continue down this and you think to yourselves, okay, this product really isn't the best fit, right? Understanding, at least now I know exactly what they're looking for. I know exactly what they're doing. And even saying, hey, I really appreciate this. I appreciate how at length and at detail you have explained it. Can I take this back to the team and kind of whiteboard around this, right? Because now you're showing them I've listened to you, I understand. And to be honest, like if you came back with a solution, that would have been an easy sale because now you've said, I've listened to you, I've understood your problems. I went back to the whiteboard on my end, and even on your end, if you're like, hey, they only changed about 20% of our product, we can actually do this, right? Now you're coming back to the table telling them, I've listened to you. 9 times out of 10, they're going to buy from you just based on that trust factor, right? Just based on the fact that you were willing to listen. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients where they've explained problems to me about their business growth. Hey, we need more Facebook followers. Well, Facebook followers isn't what I do. Like I do business growth. If that's part of it, great, but not just a silo. But as I unpacked the onion with them, I realized it wasn't just about that. It was actually this credibility in the medical space where if you had more followers in the medical space, and you had more patient stories in the medical space, and you had right more 5-star reviews in the medical space, like it all adds up. But all they saw in their day-to-day life was that their doctor posted on Facebook a 5-star review. Their doctor that they're competing against posted, a patient story. And so all they thought was I need to post more on Facebook. But they didn't actually understand and walk it back to, well, what are they posting and how are they curating, right? And so if I would have said I don't do Facebook posts, like that's we do everything including that, but we don't just do that, we would have lost a partner. But instead it was walking that back and understanding what it is they're hoping to accomplish, right? And so I think that would be a lateral example to what you had is, in that discovery meeting, you may not have thought you could have solved the problem, but maybe further discovery, maybe whiteboarding. But even if you were to whiteboard and come back to the table and say, hey, this isn't something we solve, chances are you probably could have referred them to somebody. And not that you're in it for this, but you probably could have saved the relationship in terms of they understand you as the authority. You've made a little bit of a referral fee by referring it to a friend that you know could handle it. They got the business, and now you're continuing to build relationship for future projects, right? That's the long game.
Amazing. I'm going to summarize it in a slightly different way, but I'm going to talk to my developer audience, if you will, right? So everybody out there who's a developer, an architect, someone like me who's thinking, we need great code to build a product. Perfect. Absolutely right. You need great code. You need scalable software. You need scalable software. You need a good user interface. If you're building an app or a website or a web application, absolutely, you need a good user interface. You need good ways to do code reviews. You have automated ways of doing it, but let's say that's just as important. Picking the right technology stack, absolutely, very important. Making sure what you don't have to do, you don't do anymore with AI and AI tools. We didn't talk AI in this conversation, Ryan, but I promise you in the next one we will, in the space of sales and marketing and how all of AI is making a difference. So that is important too, right? As we build our next API, we're looking at how to build it, not just the outcome and the end result being context sensitive to AI and to the current day and age we're living in, but also the whole process of approaching the problem. We're trying to change the way we've done things in the past, given the advent of AI. All of that is incredibly important, right? As an engineer, we're like, yep, that makes sense. But what we sometimes tend to think is not as important is now that you have a product, you have to have everything that Ryan's mentioned here in terms of sales and marketing, whether it's inbound, outbound, the language, the body, the body language, the actual verbiage you're using, the reach outs you're doing, the funnels, the pipelines. All of this sounds like fancy sales terminology, but sometimes you need, not sometimes, all the time, right? You need that to be very much part of the mix. So I would say that if you're a founder, early stage whatnot, who's sometimes not sure if my next hire should be a developer, a product manager, or a salesperson, and if you're thinking, hey, I should put my money in engineering because that's most important, I highly recommend that you think one more time, because that next hire, you might be better off either hiring a salesperson or maybe partnering with a sales company and using that budget so you can actually be aware of what you're building. And I say this because we did things very differently. And again, when you go back, hindsight is 2020. We would have done it differently as well. So as we're building our next set of things, we are cognizant of this, and we've started enjoying the sales conversations, be it with podcast guests and experts such as yourself, Ryan, or with the clients, right? We have a lot more patience than we've done in the past. And when we don't have the patience, we are incredibly better at faking the patience than we were able to in the past, right? This was the advice that one of the sales people told me is like, Krish, if you're really upset about something because they asked you these stupid, silly questions, it's all right. It happens all the time. Just go through the call very peacefully and patiently. And then once the call's over, find a way to vent that out. Give me a call if you have to vent it out, right? That's totally all right because we all need our outlets. So what you've shared here, Ryan, is amazing, right? So thank you for your
Yeah,
time.
thank you.
The last non-technical question I'm going to ask you is, what's your favorite food?
Gosh, my favorite food?
Yeah.
That's a great question. I enjoy smoking meats. So my favorite food would have to be beef ribs.
Are you in Texas? No, I'm just kidding. Where are you located,
No,
by the way?
I'm in Arizona,
Okay.
but I really enjoy smoking meats. I love the craft of it. I love knowing that after I pull this off the grill, 20, 24 hours later, it has to be great, and everything that goes into it, the prep work, the smoking of it, the mop sauce, the wrapping it in the right butcher paper, not tinfoil. Like there's so much baked into the craft of it that I love. And so I smoked up some beef ribs one time, and they're the best parts of ribs, the best parts of brisket. It was exceptional. So if I had to choose, that would
You
be
know,
it.
the sign of a good salesperson is somebody who can sell smoked ribs to a vegan, borderline vegetarian person here. I'm actually bought into what your explanation. I was like, you know what, that doesn't sound too bad. And especially, my son and I binge
Yeah.
watched Young Sheldon. I don't know if you watched that show. We fell in
Yep,
love
I
with the
love it.
show. And where there
Great
was
show.
one particular episode where Sheldon's dad talks about smoked ribs, I think, if my memory serves me right. So when you told me, I was just trying to relate. That's why I said, do you live in Texas? I
Yeah.
went to school in Texas. I've not been to
Yeah.
Arizona, but that
Yep.
was, you explained that so well. I felt like I was
Yeah.
watching like Andrew Zimmern or Anthony Bourdain, which who I
Well,
sorely
that's
miss
funny. I
actually
love it. So
on TV.
can I save that then and tell people that I sold smoked ribs to a vegan?
Oh,
Is that
you
appropriate?
absolutely did.
Yeah.
You at least sold it to the point where even if I don't end up eating it, you sold it to
You're
the point
curious.
where I can, you know what, I want to look that one up there. And I was able to imagine it because you sold it. And even if you told me, Krish, I don't even eat it or I've never eaten it, I wouldn't believe it because, again, just to summarize this, right?
Yep.
I can clearly tell you like it and you've eaten it before. So there is that honesty that you mentioned in the sales call. And there is a sense of humor, right? There was a humor in how you explained that to me. There was no need for persuasion, right? Which is great. But if push comes to shove, you have to persuade me to have smoked ribs, right? You said smoked ribs, correct?
Yep.
That is the name of the dish. Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. This is amazing. Fantastic. So, Ryan, any closing comments? This is, by the way, thank you so much for taking the time. I've enjoyed sales calls more and more and more because I have an eagerness to learn and fix things that we're not doing right, and also find a partner for us as a company.
Yeah.
either
Absolutely.
immediately or down the road, building these relationships, because you mentioned it's not selling today, like knocking on the door and say bye. That's kind of how we work as a company too.
Yeah.
We try to build a relationship and say, hey, maybe one day you're going to find value in what we do, even if not today, for the people who don't find immediate value. So we don't come across as pushy, right? Which is what we expect out of our partners as well, right? You know what? After a good conversation, like, you know what? I need somebody to help us with our sales team. And who do I go to, right? The people who've built these conversations either on LinkedIn or through our podcast here, for instance, right? And that's what we're trying to do, because when people watch it or listen to it, they're like, you know what? Yeah, I need somebody to help out with sales, and here's some company and a person I can reach out to. And if you have other links that you want for us to include, Ryan, more than happy to include that as well. But otherwise, I'll include your LinkedIn profile in your company. Any closing comments to our audience?
Yeah, a fun one. So if they actually go to our website, if you've listened to this show up to this point, I love it. Striventa.com, scroll down, you can request your own free cookies.
Oh, no, let me go there. Give me a second. Let me find. Okay. Where should I go here?
On the homepage, if you scroll down, right there. So you can actually choose to accept our cookies. That's my little online humor for you. Not only are you accepting my cookies online, but the cookies will be delivered to your doorstep in 7 days. So if you click that link, right, boom, there you go. And it's just something fun we like to do. I mentioned serve first. And for us, I've gotten texts from people before that say, I can't believe the cookies actually came here. It's like, what did you expect? You ordered free cookies. And they're like, but you're not in the cookie business. I was like, yeah, but I'm in the making people happy business. We're serving people and starting the conversation that way. If you're on my website, chances are, you know, we're a pretty niche company, right? And so if you're on our website, chances are there could be a good fit. And so, but it's about serving first. So anyway, that's always something fun. And I get to incorporate a little bit of humor there.
Wow, that's amazing. So you're saying you're one step away. I'm just
You
going to
should fill it
say
out. Yeah.
from, give me one second, something like that. No, actually, it doesn't. I was doing it on my page. What am I sharing here? Give me one second. Actually, give me, I think I was sharing. Let me share something. You said
I'm going to
humor.
hold you to filling it out. Yeah. I'm going to
Yeah,
hold you to filling it out.
yeah. Something like this, right?
I will promise you, if you fill it out, I promise you, if you really are interested, I will send you some smoked ribs in a freezer pack, and all you got to do is heat it up.
Lovely. This is amazing. Just there's plenty of learning that I've had here, and I have
I
no
love
doubts
it.
that folks are watching and listening to this on Spotify and Apple and whatnot will go away with that learning, and then the sense of positivity that you've sort of brought to the table, right? Uh, you know, uh, I think salespeople maybe are more fun too. I don't know. I don't want to say that. I'm not a salesperson. Yeah,
It's a
maybe
different
engineer.
type of fun. I met some really fun developers. It's a different type of fun,
Different
maybe.
type of
Same
fun.
amount.
Amazing. So, folks, again, just to recap here, we had a chat with Ryan Caracciolo, founder of Striventa and Hyperdrive WP, who shared some amazing strategies. I said he would share it before the call, but he's already shared those strategies with us here to drive real business growth without all the fluff. So, again, Ryan, thanks for taking the time. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Krish. Appreciate you having me.